Hello, everyone. Today's insider is Israel Nitzan, the acting Consul General of Israel in New York. Thanks so much for joining me. First of all, what kind of reactions are you receiving from community leaders, Jewish community leaders here in New York regarding the Israel-UAE agreement?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to your show. The reactions that we received were actually very, very positive from a wide range of leaders and organizations. I think that for all of us, it's been quite a difficult year, and it's always good to receive and to hear good news. And for a change, the good news are coming from the Middle East. So the reactions were very positive. I think that we should also not forget that the Jewish diplomacy played an important role in leading by leading American Jewish organizations and prominent leaders, engaging with moderate voices in the Middle East, encouraging those Arab leaders to choose the way of peace and reconciliation with Israel, and actually advocating for peace in the region. So in many ways, yes, the reactions were positive, but I think that for many Jewish community leaders and organizations, it felt as if that they actually have their share in making history.
Were Israeli diplomats aware of the negotiations?
Not many people know that Israeli diplomats have been actually working on building these relations between Israel and the UAE for over 2 decades. And especially in the last 4 years. And the normalizations of relations actually started before the official announcement. And actually, since 2017, Israel has a formal diplomatic mission in Abu Dhabi, accredited to the International Renewable Energy Agency. I can also share, from my own experience as an Israeli diplomat to the UN not long ago. I had good relations with diplomats from Sunni Arab world and countries, and of course, and especially from the Arab Gulf. So what I'm describing here is not an exception. So in many ways, it was a matter of time for this to go public, and I think that this is the major development here. And today, now we must all work to pour content into the relations. The official delegation that visited the UAE launched official dialogue on the framework of the relations that will include, of course, mutual opening of embassies, direct flights, and many other bilateral agreements. One thing that I should say is that the importance of this agreement between Israel and the UAE is the visionary future. It basically establishes a visionary future of peace and prosperity between our countries and between our peoples. And actually, the countries, Israel and the UAE, for a change, for the first time, in the dynamic in the Middle East, actually have actually given priority to the well-being of their own citizens as the first step towards peace. So what we should do is basically encourage more and more people-to-people engagement in business, in cooperation, in science, innovation, tourism, and actually even in combating COVID-19 together.
What has been the most surprising gesture that you've seen since the announcement was made?
I think that for me, what has been most surprising are the reactions of the Emiratis, especially on social media, as if the relations with Israel are the most natural thing. And again, the feeling was that it was just a matter of time, and we want to go public and talk about it. In Arabic, the word normalization is tatbir. Now, Hebrew speakers would probably find the word teva, nature, in this word. And I think that this is basically the essence of the feeling, is that having the relations with Israel is the most natural thing, and people are just happy about it.
Are you now in touch, or were you previously in touch with the UAE ambassador in New York, or the permanent representative at the UN? And can we expect enhanced cooperation between representatives around the world?
I think that, well, since we all believe in modern diplomacy, my relationship with the Consul General of the UAE actually started on Twitter. Not surprising, I know. I did not follow the Consul General. His name is Abdallah Shaheen, before the declaration on the agreement. I started following him actually on that day exactly. And he followed me immediately after that. And by following each other, we managed to exchange very friendly messages on Twitter using the direct messages. I have yet to meet him. I haven't yet done that, but we are in touch, and our offices are in touch. And I believe that we have a lot to do here in New York, and New York can serve as a wonderful platform on which we can actually build not only the personal relationship, but also strengthen peace between our countries.
You spent time in Egypt during the Arab Spring. Can you tell us about your experience there and what it taught you about our peace with Egypt and why it isn't a warm peace?
I served as an Israeli diplomat in Cairo, Egypt for 5 years, and with the mission, a very clear mission of building peace between Israel and Egypt and the peoples in Israel and in Egypt after 5 wars between the countries. And yes, I also experienced firsthand the dramatic events of the Arab Spring. And I think that one thing that I know is that peace is fragile and it must be nurtured. And the key is, in many ways, education, and especially educating the younger generation. We need to educate them to accept the other, to accept the difference between us, to accept Israel also as a legitimate neighbor in our region. When I speak about the secret of success of any peace in our region, it can be found in 2 places: in the media and in textbooks. Basically, with the media and with the textbooks, you educate the people, forming and molding public opinion, forming also educating for peace and reconciliation. But I think that in retrospect, also the peace between Israel and Egypt was and still is strong enough to endure periods of instability, like, for example, 2011, like the Arab Spring, like the attack of the mob on our embassy in Cairo exactly 9 years ago, and also a year in which the Muslim Brotherhood ruled Egypt. So it's a matter of educating the people. It's a matter of forming public opinion that is supportive of peace, supportive of reconciliation, and accepting your neighbor as a legitimate neighbor right across the border.
What would you say is the biggest obstacle to obtaining those warmer relations with both Cairo and Amman?
Well, I think that Egypt and also Jordan are important partners in achieving peace and security in the Middle East. But what is missing, for example, in addition to the educational element, is the component of actually to achieve a warm peace, the people-to-people relations. And yes, the current government in Egypt is working to change this reality and to strengthen and to encourage such a bilateral exchange of cooperation and acceptance of the other. During the days of President Mubarak, this is when I served in Cairo, there was no real effort to educate the people to accept Israel. And you can find it, for example, in the examples are anti-Israeli and sometimes even anti-Semitic TV shows on government TV, as well as the misrepresentation of Israel and Jewish history also in textbooks, in schools and in universities.
You engage with an exceptionally diverse crowd here in New York and in the United States. What would you say is the biggest challenge representing the state of Israel?
Well, these days, since everything has become political and partisan, our main effort here is to keep Israel outside of the heated political discussion and inside the bipartisan consensus in the American political discourse, as well as in the public debate. We work with both sides of the aisle. We develop relations with diverse community leaders, and we basically try to bring the Israeli added value to lives of diverse communities here in New York, in our 5 states, and also nationally in the United States. And of course, we invite those communities to, and community leaders, of course, to engage with us, to find partnerships with Israeli nonprofits and community leaders. And we usually say that we want to bring Israel to the United States, not only as a startup nation, but also as the social impact nation, and to find ways to actually use and utilize the Israeli very innovative and vivid societal ecosystem, and to find ways to change people's lives here on the ground, connecting them to, if I may say, American Jewish values of Tikkun Olam. So this is what we're trying to do, and we're trying to work with whoever is willing to engage with us, and we want to bring Israel to New York. This is what we're doing here.
Israel Nitzan, Acting Consul General of Israel to New York, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much again for inviting me.